I'm to move on to the to the last block. I would like to tell you this is the last block, and then we'll have a question and answer session. The last block is about power and the power of the assembly and the impact it can have. Marcin, I'll ask you in order to, I know it's an important block, but I'll still ask you to be quite short in order to give the opportunity for people to ask questions in the last part of this workshop. So power and impact, and then Graham, you'll be able to jump in after Marcin too.
So we were very fortunate in the city of Gdańsk on the local level to have a mayor who made this courageous decision to come and stand in the front of the whole group of citizens assembly and to say that whatever if your recommendations reach the support of 80% of your group, I will implement them. And that's I think it's one of the good practices. Nevertheless, in some cases, it's just not practical, but I mean, not practical in terms that politicians don't have like this willingness to participate, to invite citizens to a process which would be empowered, as Graham has mentioned. So the other option is that all recommendations that reach, let's say, support of 60 or 65%, there is a response to all of them. And the good practice, as I see it, is that it is explicitly, clearly said from the very beginning what will happen with the recommendations. Let's say the government or the city hall, they say, we will respond within 6 months. We will create a special committee, a special group, which will go into those recommendations. And after 6 months, we will present a clear, like a roadmap for what to do next with them, how to implement. I think this is a very good solution. And what I would like to also emphasize that it should be the members of the Citizens Assembly presenting those recommendations to the government. It should be like a press conference, something like this, to signify who has made it and that the citizens are actually delivering those recommendations, presenting them, and the mayor or on the national level, the prime minister is receiving them, and he or she says what will happen next.
Okay, thank you. So binding, deadline for response, and citizens, of course, should be the ones presenting those recommendations. Graham, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think there's a weakness in the Citizens Assembly model in terms of citizens present their recommendations and then the body disappears. And I think there is a reason, which means it's hard for the assembly can't hold the decision makers to account in the way that other groups can. So I think there may be a good reason to bring, well, no one's really done it yet, to bring an assembly back after a certain number of months to just potentially review what's been done as almost like a sort of transparency or oversight mechanism. It's something which I think would be worth considering. There is a real danger that, and we have seen it, that political leaders selectively listen to what comes out from the recommendations, and that they implement the things that they were going to implement anyway and don't implement the things they don't like. So I think what Marcin is pointing at here is really critical, which is to getting that buy-in to actually see those things which have large-scale support within the assembly of being taken seriously. So I think this is an area where we need to spend, those of us who are interested in citizens' assemblies need to think quite creatively about how we ensure that oversight happens over time to make sure these things are done.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Graham. And I totally agree with you. And I think that when you design a climate assembly, you have to also design, and it's as important, design the after assembly. And I think it is also a design work, meaning what will happen with those recommendations? Who will they take? When do we push again saying you need to give a response? And that needs to be designed, as at the same time that the climate assembly itself, because you've got to show the participants saying this is what's going to happen after. And by doing that, then you really enable participants to say, wow, this is important and there's a mechanism for after.
Can I just jump back in a second? One of the things I think which is really interesting is when we evaluate assemblies, all these evaluations of assemblies that have been done, which have said how great they are, they actually evaluate what happens in the assembly. They haven't evaluated what happens after the assembly. Not many of them. And I think we really need to do much more work evaluating and keeping an eye on what actually happens after the assembly. So I fully agree with what Dimitri was saying.
Okay. Doreen and Marcin, I see you've got some more questions. I'll ask you to be short because I really want to jump in and leave the possibility to participants to ask you questions.
Okay.
Very quickly, really just to support Graham, I think accountability is a really big issue. And where you have increasingly authoritarian governments who will be selective, we have to be really clear from the beginning what our accountability structures are.
Okay, and I would like to just say that, of course, we have done it, Graham. So we have organized a meeting of a Citizens' Assembly a year after. It was a special meeting where the civil servant presented what they have done so far, and it was publicly presented also to the media. This transparency mechanism has already been tested, and we have done it.
Of course you have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both to Graham and Marcin for all this insight and the others that popped in. Now, I would really like to end this workshop by giving you the possibility to talk to each other and try to identify the best questions you want to bring forward to Marcin and Graham. How are we going to do this? We're going to go into breakout sessions again. So we're 24. We could do some breakout sessions. We could do like five breakout sessions, 5 or 6. I'll let you, Michaela, choose that. And then when you get into the first breakout session, you're going to ask among yourselves among the group, what did I not understand and what do I need more from Marcin and Graham? What kind of further information would I like to get? Or really, what is it that I have not understood and that I do want to understand? And you have 10 minutes to talk about that. You'll be 4 or 5 in each group, and try to identify 1 or 2 questions you want to put to the floor. After these 10 minutes, you're going to be joined by a second group that will have done the same exercise. You will share your questions, so you'll be more or less 10. You will share your questions and see if they are similar or they can enrich the question. And at the end of that second 10 minutes, you should come up with 1, 2, or 3 questions that you want to put to us, Graham, Marcin, Tila, myself. And so just these 2 times 20 minutes among yourselves to really think about what more do you need from us and how can we help you more, okay? So, Michael, I'm going to ask you to send everybody in these workout sessions. We'll come back very briefly for a few seconds to form a second breakout session of merging 2 groups. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think everyone's there, 24, I see. So we were 27 at the beginning, 24 now. So we're very happy you all stayed on board. And now it is the question moment and seeing if our experts do have an answer to everything. So I hope that your questions will be right to the point. And I'm going to ask Tila to take notes of these questions in the chat. Like that, we can keep a track of them. To put them forward to Marcin and Graham before opening the floor again. Okay, so and so this last session, there were 3 groups, group 1, 2, and 3. The group 1, who is the spokesperson for the group 1? Do you know? Or can I just take the first spokesperson? It doesn't really matter if it's group 1 or 2 or 3. Nobody? So
I can start.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we have 3 questions. I'm copying them right away. I'm very effective. You see them? Sorry, no, you don't.
You need to send them to everyone now.
Yes, exactly. That was the problem. So out of 2 groups, we formulated 3 questions. One is about the final suggestions of the randomly selected participants. So how can we guarantee that they are enough ripe, elaborated, and kind of implementable? Like, should there be some kind of body to verify and make them more, improve their quality? Or is it always that it goes straight and the quality is being ensured within the process? So that's one. Then the buy-in of the general public and raising the public awareness around climate issues. Like, there was just comment also that we didn't touch upon this topic, and then I explained that the initial agenda for this workshop was 3 times longer, covering many more topics, but still maybe some words around that. And third, is it possible to organize the climate assembly totally online? We've been thinking about that here in Estonia, but is it a risk of too big in scale to be taken, or what are your thoughts around that? Because I know that Marcin is actually working around that.
Okay, good. Who wants to take the floor for the other group, a group where Tilo was not, for example? Anybody? Marcin.
Maria, yes, I don't know which group number it was, maybe second group. We discussed actually around one question. I don't know if I can really formulate at this moment, but let's say we were more discussing around the problem where the many questions are arising. It's like how to choose the random group. It's quite clear that if there's a socio-demographic profile, what it is, but how we have this dimension of climate awareness, especially what question to ask from people that we can group them, that they would be representative, because different groups understand differently the question, and it starts to be really too much importance how you verbalize the question in general. And then we were discussing around should we ask about general value scales instead, not about climate, in general, the value scale, what our sociologists are using for research. So we will have a good theoretical ground for that, to map the values of the person. And then we can also measure the climate awareness for the pre-assembly and after assembly questions, just to measure how actually this process have been making people better to understand the issue in general, but not to elect them based on those questions. This was like question and answer together, but we just discussed around the problem. So maybe the experts can now reflect on it, what they think about it, how to bring this climate question or value question into this random selection process.
Great. Tilo, did you take note of that? If you just can, oh yes, here it comes. Good, thank you. Then now the last.
Yes. Hello. We had several questions also, but finally we are just proposing one. And the question is how to actually get the politicians on board when they don't seem to want to deal with this topic actually in Estonia. And maybe what could be more kind of detailed question is like, who could we ask to help us with the politicians? Like what kind of experts did you have in your processes involved? I don't know, some political science experts or journalists or whatever. And what kind of preparation should we do really carefully in the very beginning to get the politicians we need in this process? and especially when we're thinking about that it needs to be the ministers or the prime minister and the government who is the owner of this process. So this is very crucial for us.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Mayu. So I think we've covered the three groups. Okay, Michael, you confirm, huh? We had three groups at the end.
Yes, this is correct.
Perfect, thank you, Michael. So I have, I'll start with a question about the random selection, and if we can work with general values in order to measure the climate awareness. Would you, Graham, I'll ask you to jump in there.
So I can see the value of doing that, but it would be very complicated because you've got to answer a lot of questions. And one of the things that you try and do is to make this as simple as possible. And I think having a really long survey will mean that certain people won't complete it. We know that that's likely. What they've done in the UK is a very simple one, which is asking people how concerned they are about climate change. It's not a question about how much do you know about climate change or what's your awareness of climate change. It's about how much you worry about it, how much you are concerned about it. And they decided that that was a good proxy. But I can understand your desire to do something more complicated, but I would worry about having too many questions.
Okay. On that, yeah, Mara.
Yeah, could I just reflect? So the issue here is the length of the questionnaire is the problem here, but the approach itself would be feasible if it would be shorter.
Yeah, it's feasible. I mean, you've just got to make sure that you have a public justification for doing that. I mean, sometimes simple is easiest. Sometimes simple is easier to explain. So, for example, saying, you know, we want to make sure that we cover people who are concerned and who aren't concerned, and we've got that measure. Trying to explain to everybody what this very sophisticated value surveys are, that these value questions are might be difficult.
Yeah, and if I can,
thank you.
If I can jump in, Mahatsu, I mean, I think some people it will be difficult for them to answer these kind of questions, and they will be maybe repelled by saying, oh my God, this is quite intrusive. If they want to know about my values, then what, you know, do I really want to participate in this? And so it might break the participation of a few people that will think that it's maybe too intrusive into their own beliefs. Marcin, do you want to say something about this?
I think the most important is to understand what is the justification, what is the reason for doing this poll or attitudinal, this additional question. And here it is the credibility of the whole group. I mean, you need to check whether or not there are only activists, climate activists in this group. And this is the reason for this additional question. And I find it justified. I also think it is a good idea, and we have done it in the city of Wrocław. When you have a topic of transportation, you make sure that not everyone in the group is a fan of bicycles only. That's why you ask the question, what is your main choice of transport daily? To make sure that it's not just one group of activists pushing their solution. And this is the justification. And the simple question that Graham mentioned, how concerned are you, does the job.
Okay, thank you, Marcin. I'll go to the next question now. Actually, I want to try to merge two questions. It was about how to get politicians involved and how to get citizens involved. So my first feeling is when citizens are involved, politicians then follow. So I'll start with the first question by saying the question was the buy-in of the general public and the raising the public awareness around climate issues, how to organize that. If I may reformulate it a little bit or put a little add-on, how to make sure that this climate assembly doesn't stay in its own little climate assembly, and how to make that happen in order for the people that are not part of this random selection are still aware of it and can in somehow follow the work of these citizens, and then of course then that will enhance public awareness. Graham, you want to jump in?
I actually think this is a really big challenge, sometimes I can answer this in two ways. One is, let's not expect too much of a citizens' assembly. One is, the citizens' assembly is trying to bring the informed judgments of citizens to bear onto a really difficult political decision. That's its main function. So its main function isn't to be the vehicle for broader climate awareness, but it can be part of that process. So don't expect just by running a citizens' assembly that will be enough in terms of raising public awareness. But there are clearly strategies for doing this. And obviously one key strategy is that this is potentially going to make a significant difference. I think one of the issues in the UK is that the Climate Assembly in the UK is going to report to parliamentary committees and it's not to government. Whereas in France, this is directly going to Macron. So in France, I think there's been much more discussion and deliberation around public deliberation around the convention, simply because it is much more empowered. But I think there are sophisticated ways. I think again in the way that we said, don't spend all your money and your time in terms of designing the perfect assembly. I think we need to spend money, we need to spend resources, we need to bring public. People who are good on public public profile into the process, and design broader public engagement as part of the process.
Okay, so a little bit of sometimes marketing. Can I use that horrible word?
I think you can use that horrible word.
Okay, Marcin?
Well, there is a nice word which is called visibility, and actually for us it is a standard. And each time there is when there is a budget for a citizens' assembly, part of it is like marked for a promotional campaign, and this includes posters and advertising in internet, whatever, plus sending out news information to the media. So definitely it is the role of the coordinating team to ensure that the visibility is covered. All educational phases are transmitted live on the internet, and this is like a ground rule. It is a standard. And definitely there is also a standard which is called openness, which means everyone can send their input. Even if you are a citizen who was not randomly selected to the group, you can send your suggestions, you can send your comments, and so on throughout the whole process. And this is actually linked to the first question, which was asked: how to guarantee that the proposals are enough ripe and implementable to present them to policymakers. So in the Polish model, the draft recommendations are presented to the public, to the experts and stakeholders, ideally at least 2 weeks before final voting. So experts, stakeholders, anyone can send comments, and those comments are gathered. We create like a booklet of them, and the final day of a citizen assembly starts with a reading phase, because we want to make sure that the participants actually read those comments, and they can be a large number of them. So that's how you ensured also broader participation. And definitely I would say, if you know that your citizens' assembly is empowered, that it will have an impact, an influence on a decision, you will get interest from the media, from the citizens, if they are making a real decision, if it's not just an exercise in participation, if there is something at stake, there will be interest, no doubt about it.
Okay, Graham?
So we're jumping onto another question here, which is the implementable question. And I think what the French have done is really interesting, because it is true that sometimes when these reports and recommendations come out, they then need some translation in order to become law, or in order to become a referendum, or in order to become a regulation. And that can leave some space for I was going to say manipulation, but not even manipulation, but reinterpreting what the citizens want. And so what they're doing in the French Assembly is having legal experts working with the citizens, so that when their citizens are writing their recommendations, they're written in a way that can immediately be implemented into law. So it doesn't require someone else to implement it, someone else to kind of interpret it. So I think there's something to be learnt there about the kinds of support that we provide to citizens, because otherwise they will write in ways that aren't necessarily directly implementable.
Okay, thank you, Graham. But then once we have these citizens on board through these different mechanisms, how do we get the politicians on board? How do we get, so maybe we've got, one or two politicians or a parliament that's sort of initiated this process, but how do we really get all the politicians on board and a real political buy-in? Maybe you want to start, Marcin, with your first feelings about this.
What definitely works is to invite politicians to see the process on their own. It's one of the best ways, even if it means, sending someone on the plane, to United Kingdom or to France, maybe not to France, to United Kingdom or to Scotland to see a good quality process. Sorry, they should see a good quality process. So, but definitely when we invite, let's say, a deputy mayor or a mayor to the Citizens' Assembly for the first day, when they see the group of those people, listening carefully to the presentations, asking reasonable questions, they become convinced. You don't need to do anything. The Citizens' Assembly defends itself by its own quality. So, and the strategy for Poland, I can tell you what it is. So the political buy-in is to invite the politicians from the governmental level to a local level Citizens' Assembly, organized, let's say, in Warsaw or in Wrocław. You invite the minister. We wanted to invite the Minister of Climate. I had already had talks with the civil servants from the Wrocław, whether or not can we do it. And so they said, yes, we can invite the Minister of Climate to come to Wrocław to see how it works, so that he could easier accept the idea for the national level Citizens' Assembly. Definitely, this is the best way. Other ways are just, to meet, to give them presentation, to invite them for a conference or something like this. Or there is also this Extinction Rebellion method, sometimes not recommended. Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. Before I give you the floor, Graham, I'd like to hear about what Doreen thinks, if you want to, Doreen. But I think your insight could be interesting. You as a civil servant, and how you have perceived the change in Scotland.
I think it's, thank you for asking. It's not easy. We have currently had one citizen assembly, which was proposed by the current government. It came to them via a political route, so from their political party, and they proposed it, they led on it. So that our climate change assembly has come from a different route, in that when the recent updating of our Climate Change Act went to Parliament, Parliament proposed that a citizen assembly be held. So I think that was interesting, in that it'll be interesting to see how the government accepts that. They have accepted it, and they are leading on it. But I think that is, I don't think we're there yet in convincing our politicians that this is a really credible thing that we should be doing on a regular basis and in some sort of institutionalized way. So I think you need to have politicians on board. I would much rather have it come from a broad base, political base, so that there is cross-party buy-in. I think it's a real problem for the UK that what we see is parliamentary committees running citizen assemblies and a government sitting back saying, nothing to do with us, guys. So I think we should all take this really very seriously. We do want the magic to get through, because I think it is magic. But I also think we need to be able to give politicians the comfort that this isn't a mad way of behaving, that if you give people sufficient information and allow deliberation to happen, that their fear that they're going to come back with something that is almost impossible to implement simply doesn't, the evidence doesn't bear that out. So I think both inside government and outside government, we have a role to play in that persuading. Our government is a reforming government and is more inclined to work in this way than others, but we're still not there yet.
Thanks a lot for that insight, Doreen. Graham.
Well, clearly you should invite me to come and talk to them. That's the first thing you do, and pay me lots of money for it. The second one thing is that there are now more and more politicians who have done this and done it successfully, and bringing those into the conversation. I know, for example, one of the really big influences on some of the Scottish politicians were the Irish politicians who had done it. So, there is a kind of, it's picking out the right people from the right political parties who have had experience of this and bringing them to Estonia or bringing them into conversations with people, because they want to know it works okay. There are other practitioners like ourselves who can also do that kind of work. And let's be clear, the one in the UK has happened because of the pressure of the student strikes, Extinction Rebellion, Greta Thunberg. The one in France has happened because of the yellow vest protests, and this was a way of Macron being able to respond positively to the yellow vests. So sometimes the pressure is going to be pressure from below. Sometimes it will be politicians who learn from other politicians that they admire, or learn and realize it is something they can do well. So I think both of those strategies are strategies that are worth thinking about.
Okay, thank you, Graham. If I may, I'll add also a few comments on that. I don't know who said that, but it's about a process, convincing politicians little by little to start working on with deliberative democracy, that being on climate or other issues, is about a process. You won't be able to change politicians or the politician scene from one day to another. So it's about patience. It's about having a kind of strategy and a process on how to convince them little by little. And Doreen talked about the magic of it. And I do think there's a magical element sometimes when you do see these assemblies working. And that is about modernizing democracy. And I think that today, going towards not all politicians, but some politicians, and I think that all countries have got these politicians that do want to modernize and be bold and be bold to dare taking these steps towards deliberative democracy in order to modernize the system. And that is something that has worked for me on my side by saying, come on, let's go a step forward. You've got to be an actor of that modernization of democracy. And finally, there's the question too of saying to them, as Doreen said, nothing terrible is going to come out of this. There's got nothing sort of impossible. Actually, as a matter of fact, the recommendations of these citizens are going to help you to decide and will help you to go to take decisions, because you will have the voice of also citizens, a randomly selected citizen assembly that you can put next to different experts and your political belief. So it will help you decide on that issue, or whatever issue being, climate or other. Okay, does anyone want to jump in here on this buy-in for citizens and politicians before I move on to the next and last question? No, I can't see anyone. Graham?
I just wanted to jump in because there is an assumption always that this is a progressives agenda, which it very often is. You know, the parties involved in and are interested who are progressives, but we've also had more populist leaders and populist parties show an interest. And it was interesting in East Belgium, in in Eupen, where we have where this process has been more institutionalized. The party that wanted to push it the furthest was actually the local populist party, and their view was this is everyday citizens making decisions, and that we should actually be much more empowered. So it's very interesting that we kind of have an assumption that this is only a progressive agenda. And I think because of our language, very often we appeal more to those people, but actually there is a language here which can appeal much more broadly, and we do ourselves a disservice by not actually speaking sometimes in the language in responding to populist rhetoric, etc.
No, I agree. Sorry, I used the word inadvisedly.
Okay, thanks, Graham. So ordinary people, everyday people are the words you have to use in Estonia to get your message across. Or it can help. I still have two questions, actually. Sorry. There's a one about the final suggestions. How can we guarantee that those proposals are ripe enough, are qualitative, are implementable? How can we make sure that this assembly will come up with real, true recommendations and not things that just float a little bit or are a little bit loose? Who wants to start on this? Marcin, Graham. Marcin, go ahead.
Well, this is something that I mentioned. I mean that for me, what is crucial is the review process, that the draft recommendations are reviewed by expert stakeholders and so on. This is like someone from the outside of the Citizen Assembly is looking at those, and those comments are well taken by the members of the Citizen Assembly. And that's it, that's easy.
Graham?
I also think, so where I mentioned the French using the legal experts, but I also think this is very important. It's very important. This is related importantly to the task that's been set. If the task that is being set is a clear task and is a well thought out task, typically the responses are much more focused and much more implementable. When people are given a generic task and it's very vague, they come up with vague proposals. So a lot of this is about early design work, about making it clear what it is that we're trying to achieve through this process. So if you start off in a vague way, you're going to end up in a vague way. So you need to be really clear about what it is that you're trying to drive through.
Okay, thank you. So the frame where you put this assembly has got to be clearly defined in order for people to come up with suggestions that fit the frame.
And I'll give I'm sorry to give this as an example in some ways, but the Scottish Citizens Assembly that's going on at the moment, one of its problems is it was quite vaguely framed, and that has been a problem for the citizens in terms of generating implementable outcomes, because they tend to work in because they're responding to a vague frame.
Doreen, you want to react to that?
Oh, other than absolutely to agree. It was it's been a problem from the very beginning. It was a politically framed question that had gone to Parliament before there was any proper discussion on it. So people felt they couldn't pull it back. It is so important that that initial question is right. We all recognise that now, I think. And testing of that initial question does a couple of things. One, it helps you get a better question, but it also helps you begin to socialize the idea of what it is you're trying to do. So you can actually, I like Marcin's idea of a workshop. I like the idea of thinking about that more broadly with the population if you have time. So, I mean, testing out what the question should be absolutely is really important, and I really do support what Graham says. I'm afraid ours was a bit of a struggle, and we will end up with much less clear outcomes from it, I suspect.
Okay, thanks, Doreen. So as you see, some assemblies are not always perfect, and I wanted to say something about that. as from when you're going to be starting, and I know it's not your first assembly, but any assembly today is still experimentation. Nobody's got this perfect recipe and this perfect design for any kind of assembly, what being climate or what. And every time we always learn from one assembly to another. And this is also being bold about saying, let's try it, let's do it, and we will make mistakes, but those mistakes won't be that bad, and we will learn in order to advance. So don't be afraid about making mistakes. And
well, Marcin has the perfect formula. Everybody else.
I just didn't want to interrupt.
No. So I was going to give the floor to Marcin for the perfect formula, and then to jump into the online aspect of it.
Because definitely, yes, we do learn from each one. We develop the model continually, we evaluate it, yes. But at the same time, I would say the process has been tried since the 1970s. There are really, really many years of learning. And definitely for each coordinating team, the first one is something new, and definitely I would suggest that advisory group on the process is a good idea. But once you have some experience, you can, okay, the honest, what I can say honestly, and I said it to the, a spokesman for the mayor of Warsaw called me some time ago. And I said her, and I told her that for us, experimentation is over. We can deliver you high quality process. Definitely it needs to be adapted to your specific needs and so on. But we can assure you that the high quality will be there. Just because we have done it so many times, it's not that many, but we have done it enough to ensure that the process just will work.
Thank you, Marcin. I tend to agree, but I think there's always a little, in each design, or at least I've worked on, there's always a new element. And there's always a new element of experimentation, because if not, I think I'd get bored of what we're doing. And it's always about improving it. And I think that it's true that it's no more about experimentation, but then there's always this little element linked to the context, to the space, to the people.
Oh yes, definitely. For the Citizens Assembly in Wrocław, which for me is the fifth one, there are many new elements, and I'm very happy about the developments that we have. You have even introduced a new phase, a skills training phase, which we have never done in such a way before. So, and the whole rules and processes which Adela worked on from our team, this is also something new. We didn't write it down so clearly, and it will be presented in English, I think, next week. So definitely each time there is something new.
Thank you. I'll move on to the last question now. And this is the last question about the online. Can you all imagine a big, serious, and well-designed climate assembly totally online? I know Marcin has been working on this and has been in a working group about this. Could you tell us a bit about this working group, where you are on your thoughts at this stage, and who's part of that working group?
Well, we have prepared a concept for the online version of a Citizens Assembly for the city of Wrocław, because we were stopped after the process of random selection. We have a group, it was selected, and then it was shut down. Everything was shut down in Poland. So we were thinking about what are the possible options ahead. And I started to wonder what to do with it. And at the same time, also Involve and other groups were thinking, like the Democratic Society, how can we move forward in this situation? So after some conversations about it and so on, I have prepared like a concept. This is a concept because we haven't implemented it yet, and I have posted a link to the article in the Medium in the chat, which I have described how it could be done. Definitely, the learning phase is something doable, and the deliberation phase is something that involve and our people are currently doing during the Climate Assembly in United Kingdom. So the quality is not the same. I would definitely love to meet with you all in person in Tallinn. I had my plane tickets, I had my reservation of a hotel, it was paid. So it was a very nice hotel. I really regret not coming there. Tele said something about going to sauna. It sounds really good. So, and I'm not there. I'm not in sauna. I'm in Sopot, in Poland. So, and definitely it is the atmosphere and the quality of interactions is much, much better. And it's impossible to compare it. So, okay, it's possible to compare it. The in person is better. So, but in the case of emergency, and I think it's the first time like this in the history actually of mankind that the whole world was shut down and we are left with internet. So you can design a process online, but the quality of interactions between people is not the same. So, but in the emergency, you could do it. It's still better than the model with Viktor Orban or with a Polish thing which is going on. So I would prefer the online climate assembly or citizen assembly.
Okay, thank you. So human warmth, if not sauna. Okay, Graham.
I think what you just said about human warmth is actually really critical. It's an aspect of what makes deliberation such an unusual and magic thing. I think we can get close to some of that online, but I think it's more difficult. I also have concerns that online can be more exclusionary. It might sound strange in some ways, but I think there are digital exclusions which make it difficult. And certainly when the Citizens Assembly for UK went online, it had to do a lot of work to ensure that people who didn't have the kind of computer equipment that we take for granted, which didn't have internet connection, were able to engage. And we have to understand that people have different capacities and abilities in relation to the online world. And it's much harder to support them than it is when you're face to face. So I worry that there'll be exclusions which will happen through online. I think the French and the UK assemblies have an advantage. They've met over 3 weekends already. They've met over 6 weekends. So they kind of know each other already. Starting fresh from online, I think, is a very difficult and a very different enterprise. As Marcin says, in an emergency, if you have to do it, then great, and we will learn things about it. But we have to understand that it's going to be different and it's going to be challenging.
Thank you. Well, this brings us to the end of our workshop. I'd like to still give the floor last time to Marcin for a few last words, Graham then, and then Tila will end this workshop before I just wrap up totally and send everyone home. Marcin, go ahead.
So I would like to, for the ending, I would like to present the key ingredients for the success as I see it.
The recipe.
The recipe, yes. The process needs to be well designed from the very beginning, from the question, how you phrased it, is it too broad, is it not too broad, how you do the random selection, how do you provide political buy-in, everything for the who will be the facilitator, how you organize the discussion, the deliberation in small groups, in plenary, what is your voting method? Crucial. Definitely the choice of the voting method has an influence on the outcome. Is it a simple majority voting or is it something else? So the second key ingredient would be, it is definitely for the coordinating team, but best of all for everyone involved, is to trust in people. This creates and actually really people, the participants or the people who are randomly selected to the Citizens Assembly, they do enjoy the whole process. But in order to create this good atmosphere, the coordinators should trust that the regular ordinary people are capable of delivering high quality, well thought out decisions. This is what I mean by trusting in people. It's like a key quality for the coordinating team. Definitely you need to invite the best possible experts. This is because people who are not experts themselves follow those who they perceive as experts. You don't save money on experts. No, you need the best possible experts. And when we were selecting an expert for bicycles for the city of Lublin, I asked a friend of mine, who might that be? And she told me that would be Oliver Schneider. And this is actually a person who lives in France. He's speaking Polish, but he lives in France. And we thought, can we afford to pay, for his trip? And we realized yes. And we invited him, and he came especially from France to the city of Lublin to present the solutions for the bicycles to improve the transportation. We wanted to have the best possible expert. And the fourth one and the last one is about the willingness to implement the recommendations. Once people ask from the members of the Citizen Assembly, what will happen with our recommendations? Also the experts, the stakeholders, everyone wants to know what is the impact. And if the impact is real, if you know that it will be implemented, then your attitude, your level of engagement just goes up. You know that when you're a member of a citizens' assembly, that your decision, you know that your decisions will have an influence on the lives of people. You know you are making history. And you know that your decisions, your engagement does matter because it will be implemented. So I think it is a critical point. Okay, thank you. Dimitri.
Sorry. Thank you, Marcin, for those last words. Graham, do you want to follow up on what these?
I have one thing which we haven't talked about, just very big, and it sounds trivial, but it isn't, and it's about don't be afraid to spend money on the citizens. That actually you need to make sure they have a nice place to meet, that they actually have good food and drink, that they are actually treated well, because these people are doing a service. And I've seen people scrimp and not spend the money on that, and actually it's a very critical thing which we hadn't talked about in terms of the design process. Treat these people well. They deserve to be treated well.
We didn't speak about it, Graham, because it's obvious.
Yeah, but it isn't obvious for everybody. Just wanted to say, keep this conversation going. Reach out to people who can help you. There are lots of people out here who just out there who are really interested in making these sorts of things happen. So don't just try and reinvent the wheel, and just keep asking and keep having these conversations, because that will help make the best process possible. So I hope, on a personal note, that this is the start of an ongoing conversation with you, and I'd like to thank Tila for bringing us all together.
Thank you, Graham. And I agree with you with this. I mean, be very careful about how you greet, and you've got to greet the citizens. Basically, I talked about human warmth. Human warmth is also about how the assembly will gather, in which place they will gather, if they're comfortable or not. And the whole design about making people have time to speak to each other, sometimes about other stuff than the actual topic, but really creating this human warmth between people. And that asks a bit of resources and a good lunch, and maybe a drink, being it wine or orange juice. It's not about alcohol. It's more about having these moments of decontraction and a bit of a, let's talk about something else. They anyway talk about the topic itself, that's for sure. But creating this, and by creating this warm atmosphere, you create a secure atmosphere where they feel free to express their opinions totally, and are willing to express their opinions, without fear of being judged. And that is really important, that you keep a big focus on that. And that, as Graham says, it demands a little bit of thinking, and it demands of getting these people in a warm atmosphere. Okay, Tila, I'll ask you then to wrap up this, and then just a few words on the follow-up, maybe what's going to happen. I mean, I'm as willing as Graham, and I'm sure Marcin, to continue this conversation with you in a future not too far. So Tila, maybe you want to give a little summary of the workshop and maybe what are the next steps we can look forward to?
Sure. Will you bear with me for an hour or so? No, just kidding. So the next steps, we recorded it, so we will distribute the recording, the video, with the slides from Graham and Marcin, and they will be kind of integrated in the video as well. So anyone who didn't attend can check the video, and we will spread it probably at the OECD network, also as a learning material. Then, as we first designed this workshop for Estonians only, as racist as that sounds, sorry, we are thinking about a follow-up workshop for the Estonian initiation group. I will send out kind of feedback questionnaire, just a couple of questions about like what you feel about that. Do you feel that it's necessary? Because we are so lucky to have Marcin, Dimitri, and Graham, as the very hands-on experts on these climate assemblies. So why not to use you even more for our purposes and not to repeat the mistakes that other countries have done? Although I'm quite sure that Estonians, as stubborn as we are, we want to kind of do the climate assembly in our way also. Maybe this online, integrating more online will be that. Let's see. But definitely we want to kind of shine in the world with the process. Not other Estonians, if you agree with me. Yeah. See, we're all brainwashed. Yeah, so the follow-up workshop could happen in a couple of weeks. Let's not make a too long break between, otherwise, we forget things. But I'm sure you got a lot of food for thought for today to digest. And yeah, now the thanking part. Graham, Dimitri, Marcin, love you already. I know you only for a couple of months, but but it's been fabulous. And as a small gift, we're talking about climate issues, so I will not send you any gifts over, obviously. But now I'm sharing my screen. Just a sec.
Ooh la la.
Ooh la la. So do you see that? Yeah.
Yes.
The gift is that you have planted 10 trees in Estonia.
Okay, great.
So you will get a certificate about that. You will get photos and update on the trees that are named after you. So basically, it's a very selfish gift from Estonia. So each one has, Graham has his certificate. Which one did I show? And Dimitri.
Okay.
Here's the proof that trees are planted on your name, and there's a very lovely foundation actually promoting that. So there you go. Thank you. And I think that's all from my side. I'm super excited and so happy that this all is just the start of making history, like you said. And if you want, I can take you to sauna now.
It is very interesting. It's so interesting to be able to have some roots in the ground in Estonia already without even going there. Yes. So first time it happened to me.
Thank you. Very nice gift, Tila. It's really quite innovative too. Yes, and it's.
Sorry, Piret from the Estonian Fund for Nature will send you the certificates.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's a great idea. I'll finish up by thanking to Michael that made this possible on the technical side. Thank you for the smooth going of this Zoom. It was really, really nice. And I'll maybe give the floor to the people that want to, and just give one word on how you feel about, how you feel right now, basically after this quite long process. I mean, we've been there since 4 hours. So this is quite long. Who wants to just give one word on how they feel? Just one word. Yes, Piret.
I just want to thank Teele for making all this happen, because without her, I think we wouldn't be here at the moment where we are. So this is a very great start, and I'm really looking forward for what's coming up next. And from our Estonian Fund for Nature, we also make you a small present of you can come to our conservation holidays with your friend. So I will send you up this, it's not a certificate, but like a gift by email as well. So you take your friend and come to our conservation holiday this summer, or if it's not possible with Corona, then maybe next summer, but let's hope it works.
Double gift you will get.
Wonderful, thank you.
Everything in Estonia.
Okay, who wants to jump in? Anybody else?
I just want to thank you making it international. It was very useful, and I really hope Assemblies will come to Lithuania as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lina. Someone else?
I have one word. I'm hungry.
Okay. it's 3 o'clock here. I think everyone's hungry. Okay, I wanted to thank everybody again a last time, and hope to see you soon. Hope to see you in Tallinn as it was planned, as Marcin explained. It probably will happen at some point, so you keep faith.
I'm up for Tallinn, that's for sure. I love it.
Be safe, all of you, and hopefully we'll get out of this strange period of COVID.